Welcome back. It's in the early hours of January 15th, 1966 that Nigeria's first military coup began. That's the military intervention in Nigeria. The coup was led by the five majors named as Kaduna Nzegu, E. Ipe Jonah, D. Okapo, C.I. Anuporo, and A. Ademoyega. Were later dubbed and operated out of each of the three regions of Nigeria and Lagos. The leaders of the coup claimed that their goal was to bring an end to the tribalism and corruption that had characterized the First Republic. In the process, the majors arrested all the regional premiers and killed Federal Prime Minister Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Premier S.L. Akintola of the Western region, and Premier Ahmadu Bello of the Northern region, who the young military officers believed were responsible for the chaos of 1964 and 1965. Many Northern military officers were also killed in the coup. Despite the many high-profile murders carried out by the five majors, the coup was not a complete success. In fact, it remains unclear what, if any, plan the coup leaders had to govern the country once the civilian leadership had been removed. Nevertheless, with so many of the most powerful political figures in Nigeria dead or imprisoned, the country was thrown into yet another major political crisis. The beginning of crisis in Nigeria. Power quickly devolved to the commanding officer of the Nigerian Army, Major General John Aguiyi Ironsi, who immediately went about restoring order. The main goals of the Ironsi regime, however, dovetailed with those of the coup leaders, re-establishing law and order, maintaining essential services, eradicating regionalism and tribalism, and ending corruption. Ironsi said his government would last only until such a time when a constitution is brought out according to the wishes of the people. Ironsi outlawed political parties and placed military governors in each of the regions. Included among these new military governors were the new governor of the Eastern region, Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka, who is known as Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. Initially, the military coup and the ascendancy of Ironsi were viewed very positively, particularly in the south. To many Southerners, the removal of the civilian government marked the end of an agenda of northern domination. In the western region, the collapse of the unpopular NNDP regime was greeted with jubilation, and the rioting and unrest that had plagued the region since the October elections came to an almost immediate end. Ironsi's subsequent policies as head of state alarmed many Northerners, however, who came to view the coup and Ironsi as part of a plan by Southern, specifically Igbo, officers to use the military as a means of imposing a new era of Igbo domination. In many ways, circumstantial evidence corroborated such a view. In the first place, four of the five majors who led the January coup were Igbo. All of the officers and politicians killed in the coup, only one had been Igbo, while the majority had been Northerners. The two most prominent figures in northern politics, Tafawa Balewa and Sir Ahmadu Bello, had been murdered along with their ally Akintola. The Igbo premiers of the Midwestern and the Eastern regions had been arrested but later released. To many, this pattern indicated that the coup was primarily an Igbo strike against the North. Making matters worse, Ironsi made several moves in the first half of 1966 that led many Northerners to believe that he was part of an Igbo conspiracy. Ironsi was himself an Igbo, and in an unwise political move, he tended to surround himself with Igbo advisors throughout his time in power. He allowed the coup plotters to remain in detention, rather than bringing them to a trial for the crimes that Northerners believed they had committed. He has also been accused of accelerating the promotion of Igbo officers in the military, counter to the dictates of the quota system. The most damning evidence against Ironsi in the eyes of Northerners, however, came in the form of Decree number 34 of May 24, 1966, in which he officially abolished the federal system and replaced it with a unitary system. The regional structure of Nigeria ceased to exist and was replaced by groups of provinces. Both the military and the civil service, which had previously been administered regionally, were to be integrated and administered from the center. To Northerners, this was Igbo domination in practice. To North now faced the prospect of being occupied by Southern military officers, or being administered by Southern civil servants. Furthermore, Northerners now lacked the safeguards placed in the federal system that made sure that Northerners were involved in governance to an extent commensurate with their population. Not willing to let their position slip any further, on July 29, 1966, a group of Northern NCOs and officers carried out a counter-coup, capturing and killing Ironsi in Ibadan. For 3 days, the country teetered without a head of state until the leading northern officer selected 31-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon as Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and the new head of state. Gowon immediately announced the repeal of Decree number 34, indicating that Nigeria was committed to unity within a federal structure with respect for regional differences. Gowon was to find reconciliation difficult. However, particularly with Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu, the Igbo military governor of the Eastern region, who had many gave reservations about the legitimacy of the counter-coup. In the first place, Ojukwu did not believe that Gowon had the authority to become Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. Several still living officers had higher rank and more experience than Gowon, and Ojukwu argued that any of these officers had a greater claim to the title of Supreme Commander than the usurper Gowon. A far more pressing issue, however, was the safety of Igbos in Nigeria and the ability of willingness of the military government to protect them. Between May, when Ironsi had abolished the federal structure, and September 1966, continuous violence had been directed at Igbos and other Easterners living in the north. A spate of massacres, many conducted by northern soldiers, took the lives of between 80,000 to 100,000 Easterners during the period. The worst occurring in September. These massacres sparked revenge killings of northerners resident in the Eastern region. Such events led Ojukwu to question whether Igbos could ever live in harmony within a federal Nigeria. He urged all Easterners outside the region to return home and suggested that all Northerners in the East do likewise. This led to large population movements in the latter half of 1966 and the early part of 1967. While Ojukwu was already pondering the possibility of secession on the ground that Easterners were no longer safe within Nigeria, Gowon was determined to keep the East within the Federation. A series of meetings between Gowon and Ojukwu took place in Aburi, Ghana, on January 4 and 5th of 1967. These negotiations produced only a vague and loosely worded resolution. Gowon believed that the Federation had been preserved at Aburi, while Ojukwu claimed the Aburi Agreement gave him wide-ranging powers to control the government of the Eastern region and even to secede from the Federation if he so chose. In March, Ojukwu announced that as of April 1, the government of the Eastern region will take over all federal departments, taxes, and other revenues, essentially making the region independently administered. Gowon responded by blockading the coast and instituting economic sanctions against the East. Last-ditch efforts at peaceful settlement broke down, and on May 30th, Ojukwu declared the independence of the Eastern region, which he renamed the Independent Republic of Biafra. Follow me on the next video.